Hello and welcome back to ParticularPixels. I'm Xiaoling and this is Agents of Mayhem. Agents of Mayhem is Volition's next game. It's not a sequel to Saints Row, but it is set in the same universe. It's also a third-person open-world / sandbox game, much in the same vein as Saints Row 3 and 4. And I'd say that if you have played any of those games, the combat's going to feel pretty familiar to you, albeit tuned up to 11 with this particular game, with some of the changes which they've done, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the video. So there's an evil group called Legion, who are trying to take over the world, led by Babylon, and you are working for Mayhem, which is an organization started by an ex-Legion member who are, of course, trying to stop Legion. Throughout the main storyline of the game, you'll be systematically taking down a number of the lieutenants of Legion before confronting the final boss and hopefully thwarting their plans for now. Again, if you have played any of the Saints Row games, you can expect the same kind of cheesy, humorous dialogue that was found in the other games. This time, however, all the story sequences are displayed through cartoonish cutscenes before each mission, rather than in-game cutscenes. But there's also a lot of banter going on during missions that fills in more of the story, as well as helping you to get to know some of the other characters that are in the game. Aside from the main storyline missions though, there are side missions that will serve as a way for you to unlock other agents that you can use on your missions. You start with 3, 2 are unlocked from the main storyline quests and the rest are from the side quests. Now, like the storyline missions, each of the agents' missions are presented with an animated cutscene to give you a bit of a backdrop about who they are and why they joined Mayhem. There are 2 side missions for each of these agents and about 3 or 4 missions that will predetermine a team of 3 that you have to tackle the mission with. The majority of these side missions will require you to complete Legion lairs, which is one of the features of the new game, but it's also one of my complaints about the new game, which we'll talk about a little bit later. On top of the side missions, there are a number of outposts that you can take over on the map. I believe there are 4. There are 4 cash generating locations, as well as a number of smaller tasks like rescuing hostages, killing patrols and races, and I guess the kinds of things you'd probably come to expect in any open world game. Also, the entire game takes place in Seoul, Korea, so the play area is not massive, but there is still a fair amount to do. When you are not in the city, you'll be in the Ark base above Seoul. This is where you'll be spending all the resources and money that you get from completing missions and contracts and upgrading and customizing your agents, or sending them into the world map to do away missions, or crafting gremlin tech, which are consumables, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. And then there's also a VR simulation where you can go and do challenges that again will reward you with more resources and money. Now, what separates Agents of Mayhem from Saints Row games is the ability to switch between 3 different agents at any given time. There are 12 of these agents in total that you can choose from, all of them with different abilities, different special abilities, and different ultimates. They all have a different playstyle and will fill a different role in your team comp. Some will be better at dealing with shield enemies, some are better at dealing with heavy armored enemies. In addition to their base differences, each agent can switch out their gadgets as well, which fall under 3 categories. You've got weapon gadgets, which kind of alter the behavior of their main weapon. You've got your special gadgets, which alters how their special ability is going to work. And finally, a passive, which could alter how their ultimate ability worked, but it also can alter a number of other things and give them passive bonuses and things like that. On top of these changes, you'll see that each of these gadgets has a little slot that can take a piece of Legion tech. Legion tech is acquired through quests and adds further bonuses to your agent. The Legion tech is not directly connected to a specific gadget. Just think of the gadget as a slot that you can put this tech in. So each agent can basically equip up to 3 pieces of Legion tech, which will further change the way the agent works. So yeah, there's a lot of freedom for you to change the way any particular agent behaves, which I think is really, really great. And any of these things can be changed at the Ark at any time, encouraging you to experiment with different builds and play styles. Now, as I mentioned before, there are 12 of these agents that you can choose, so that's a lot of choice in how you're going to build your team to suit the mission or to suit your particular playstyle. The combat in the game I thought was great. It's fast paced and it gets pretty hectic, and especially on the harder difficulties it really forces you to play smart. Switching characters to suit the situation, or if one is on low health, some characters have a dash allowing them to move out of harm's way or to get around the play area faster, and others have stealth instead, making them go invisible so the enemies don't know where they are. So you're basically going to be jumping around and dashing around, using your special abilities when they're off cooldown, using the environments for cover or blowing stuff up to damage enemies, doing damage as much as you can to build up your mayhem ability by damaging the enemy so that you can unleash your mayhem ability or your ultimate to wreck people. Saints Row turned up to 11, as I said before. Losing an agent in combat means that you aren't going to be able to switch that particular agent, so you'll only have 2, for example. Losing all 3 agents on any mission means you are going to fail the mission and you will have to restart from the checkpoint. Enemies drop resources, money and health, but after any particularly difficult battle or encounters, enemies sometimes drop a purple sort of Saints Row symbol, which when collected will heal all your agents and revive any down agents on your team. There are consumables, which I alluded to earlier in the video, that can be used to either buff your team or debuff the enemy team, or they can be one-use offensive abilities like calling down lightning strikes for an AoE or throwing a ball of damage through them. For example, there's even one that will auto-revive your team if everyone is downed. Now, as your team levels up and gets more powerful, the game will automatically set the recommended difficulty for your current team, or based on your current team, at least for the current mission that you're going to play. You can, of course, manually change it to make it easier or harder depending on what kind of rewards you want. Of course, harder difficulties like Rifts in Diablo will offer a higher percentage of monetary and resource reward value. So now that I've covered the mechanics, let's talk about my impressions of the game. It took me around 25 hours to get through all the main and side missions in the game, but they are all replayable at any difficulty of your choosing, which I thought was pretty cool. The city in Agents of Mayhem plays less of a role, I think, than it did in Saints Row, and honestly to me it felt a little bit flat in comparison to Saints Row and some of the other open world games out there, as if it was just there to give me a reason to drive from point A to B, to kind of give me the runaround, if I can say that. You can take other people's cars, but you're never going to need to, since the cars that you can summon are way better. You can also wantonly run over and kill people without any consequence, even though you are supposed to be protecting the people in the city. The driving in the game is arcadey and simple. It works for the most part and can actually be quite enjoyable, but if you are expecting it to serve more of a purpose than just getting from A to B quickly, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. The best part of this game is the combat. It's definitely the star of the show. It's intense, it's fast-paced, rewarding, and it's enjoyable. And with all the difficulty settings, as I said before, it can be quite challenging, which adds a lot of replayability to the game. So the developers have, of course, spoken about Legion lairs, which are randomly generated fortresses that you have to infiltrate underground. But unfortunately for me, there just wasn't enough variety with these. You'll start seeing the same rooms far too frequently, and you'll be doing the same 4 or 5 objectives over and over and over, perhaps in a different order or a different combination of them, but it's always going to be the same objectives. Destroy all the supplies, kill all the enemies, hack the computers, find some data, or kill the captain. If you only did lairs occasionally, I suppose it would be less of an issue for me, but almost all of the side quests involving your additional agents are going to be lairs. Some of the story missions involve doing lairs. Finding lair missions on the world map are obviously going to be lairs, and of course if you find lair entrances in the actual city map, they are going to be the same kind of lairs, and they're all going to be playing out the same way. So it does unfortunately get a little bit repetitive. The other thing that irked me a little bit was them getting me to drive around a lot for no apparent reason. You would deploy into the world, drive to location A, and when you get to location A, they'll send you to location B to find a lair entrance and play said lair. Or even in some of the story missions, you'll deploy into the world and then you'll get sent to location A, and then when you get to location A, it'll send you to location B. Now, in every single one of these instances, there was no reason for me to go to location A in the first place. It could have been just any random place on the map. It didn't actually matter. It had no context. Why did I have to go A in the first place? Why not just send me to B? Couldn't you have told me the stuff on the radio on the way to B? I understand that some missions have some dialogue that needs to be played out while you drive from point to point, but most of the time the dialogue is short enough that it could have been completed if I just went straight to B in the first place. And I think perhaps it would have felt less like padding if there was a context to why I had to go to location A, which is just some marker in some random place on the city. There is also no minimap in the game, which in itself is not a problem, but there's no way to quickly access your main map. You have to press tab and then you have to click on the map button with your mouse. Now I'm not sure why they couldn't have included a hotkey. There's a hotkey for the missions list, which is in the same group of menus, so they could easily have just added a hotkey for the map as well. I'm not sure why they didn't do that. And on top of that, when you're looking at your main map as well, it's really difficult to see where you are. So yeah, that was a little bit annoying at times as well. There's also no way to center on your character in the main map, so trying to find where you are on the map. And I've even had it where my icon disappeared entirely from the map as well. I guess that was obviously a bug. And on the topic of hotkeys, there is no way to cycle between your agents in combat with hotkeys. You have to use a scroll wheel, which means if you're on Agent A, you need to switch to Agent B, and then from Agent B, you need to switch to Agent C, and vice versa. Again, this would be far less of an issue if it was immediate, but it's not. You have to wait for an animation to play and your agent essentially to appear in the game world before you can switch out to the next agent. Now, cycling agents is an integral part of the combat system in this particular game, and that's why it's confusing to me that there is no hotkey for this. So here's an example. Agent B is in play. He takes massive damage and is left with very little health, so I have to switch to Agent A because I don't want Agent B to die. Now, for whatever reason, while I'm on Agent A, perhaps I need to switch back to Agent C because I don't want to go to B. He's got very low health and he hasn't healed up yet. But I have to first go back to B, which means that he has to appear in the game world, and then there's a chance of him getting killed before I switch to Agent C, which leaves me one agent short. On normal difficulties, this obviously is not going to be so much of an issue, but on difficulties 10, 11 or higher up to 15, this could potentially cause you to lose. Also, there's no way to see the current shields and health of agents that you're not currently controlling. So you don't know if he's got enough health yet for you to switch back to him. The only way to find out is to switch back to him, and then of course it could lead you into all the problems I've just talked about. And I have no idea why the game doesn't present any of this information to you. Every agent can also dash, and some agents can stealth. Now there's a cooldown for between dashes. You can't just dash all the time, but again there's no display on the HUD showing me what the cooldown is, so I have no idea when the dash or the stealth is ready for me to use again. It is quite short, and after playing for a few hours you'll get used to it, but it's still not ideal. I would have preferred there to be some kind of display so that I know the dash is ready. At least it would have been nice if there's some kind of option to have a display. Also, there's no way to cycle consumables quickly. You have to press tab, then select inventory, then select gremlin tech, and then choose your consumable. This is probably the reason why I never used any consumables just about throughout my entire playthrough, with the exception of the auto revive, which was just easier just to leave it there in case I die, so I don't have to replay entire missions. It's such an effort just to cycle consumables. It would have been nice at least if there were some hotkeys for me to be able to cycle through them. At least there's a hotkey to be able to use said consumable. Now, of course, these are all quality of life changes, but that's exactly why they should be in the game. They would make for a better experience when playing the game. Giving the player information to stuff I think that's pertinent to combat is kind of important. Yes, we can get by without it, but the experience would be so much better with it. Resources in the game are also quite abundant, so you are going to end up with far more resources than you need. And then there's also something called cores. Cores are used to upgrade your agents. Each agent can take 3 cores, which basically upgrade them to be better agents. You need to find 10 shards to create 1 core automatically. The shards can be given as mission rewards or collected from exploring the open world. Finally, there are weapon and skin customizations that you can find for each of your agents. Unfortunately, they are just color variations, which was kind of disappointing. I was really hoping for more elaborate customization. Yeah, I guess that's going to come with DLC. And lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about the performance. On Ultra, the frame rate was pretty bad, dropping below 60 in numerous places when driving around the city or in combat. I've seen it go as low as 30 in one of the story missions, which is pretty horrendous considering I'm running on a GTX 1080. Now, turning off NVIDIA specific settings and planar reflections and setting shadows to medium and effects to normal as opposed to high, I was able to get a good frame rate for the most part. However, even with those settings, there were certain moments in heavy combat where the FPS still dropped into the low 40s, which is not really acceptable. The title definitely still needs some optimization done. Now, I'm not sure if this is because it needs a specific game driver or if it's an issue with the game itself. Either way, the issue needs to be addressed. Turning down some of the details did allow for me to have a much smoother experience while playing the game, but on a next to top end PC, one shouldn't have to turn stuff down to medium in order to have a playable frame rate. And again, if I'm getting that kind of frame rate on this PC, I don't even want to know what people are going to get on lower spec graphics cards. There are plenty of far better looking, graphically more intensive games like The Witcher 3 and GTA 5 that do not have these kinds of performance problems. Outside of that, I only had one crash that forced me to restart the game. Okay, so what are my conclusions? Now, Agents of Mayhem is not a bad game at all. I have enjoyed my time with it, and I do intend on leveling up the rest of my agents, as well as trying to find a little bit more of the Legion tech in the game, since I've got less than 50% of it. The combat and the agent/team build customization are, I think, where the game is at its strongest. It allows for so many approaches and so many play styles, which I think is pretty awesome indeed. The lack of quality of life UI that I mentioned before made the combat a little bit more cumbersome, but combat was still very, very enjoyable despite these things. I think my biggest gripe with the game though is that it's held back by the repetitive nature of the layers. There just isn't enough room variety or objective variety to keep it really interesting, because you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over. Thankfully though, the story missions don't force too many of these layers on you. The driving missions in the game are very bland, they're not very interesting, as was the city itself in my opinion. I didn't really care much about exploring the city, and I didn't really care much about the people in it either. As I said before, it felt just like a ways to make me drive from point A to point B the entire time. The visual customization is also a little bit disappointing with regard to the agents, with only having color changes. The final thing I think you need to be aware of is the performance issues that I came across. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to get these problems, but I'm just telling you that I had these problems, and hopefully they'll be fixed with a patch or with a game-specific driver. But all in all, Agents of Mayhem has been an enjoyable ride back into the Saints Row universe. However, I'm just not sure that it's worth the asking price of $60. Is it worth checking out? Yes, I think for sure it's worth checking out. If it were $40, I'd probably recommend it, but at $60, I would have to say I would recommend that you wait for a sale before picking up the game. Anyway guys, that's been a look at Agents of Mayhem. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the section below. If you like the video, give it a like. If you don't, there's the dislike button as well. Share the video if you did enjoy it. It does help out the channel a lot. I've been Xiaoling. Thanks for watching. Until next time.